I would say we can formally start.
We don't have a live audience.
Yes.
We do have a live audience.
Yes.
Okay.
So, Jona, I leave you the floor.
Okay, great. Thank you, Francesca. My apologies for being late. So, good morning and good afternoon to our esteemed audience. UN Habitat warmly welcomes you to our event, Housing for All, conversation about what makes a home. Our event today is not only about the conversation we will have in a minute, but it is also the reflection of the 2020 UN Habitat Housing for All campaign. So before I welcome our wonderful panel of today, and we will really start the discussions, also a few words on the campaign itself. In this very special year, UN Habitat has launched the Housing for All campaign in October to raise awareness on the important role of housing for people to live healthy, safely, and in dignity. For this Housing for All campaign, UN Habitat has been teaming up with the Danish film director Boris Bertram and his critically acclaimed documentary The Human Shelter, and with Ikea of Sweden. And together we have created the Housing for All campaign message in the form of a campaign trailer. My name is Jona Schreier. I've been the UN Habitat lead coordinator in this collaboration, and I'm very thrilled to welcome our panelists of today, who are representatives of our partnership. And along with three special guests, we're very much looking forward to that conversation today. Ellen Maria Eira is a Sami musician and reindeer herder from Kautokeino, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, in Norway. And she's also one of the protagonists of The Human Shelter. Welcome, Ellen Maria. I don't know if you can briefly say hello so everyone knows who's talking or waving your hand.
Hi.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
We have then on the panel Andris Magnussen, who is a poet and writer from Iceland, who has just recently given a brilliant TED talk on how we need to start connecting our way of living to the future amid the challenges of climate change. A very warm welcome, Andri. With us today is also Sean Anderson, the curator of the architectural department for the Museum of Modern Arts in New York. A warm welcome to you, Sean. Also from Ikea, Niels Larsson, who's the communication leader of the Swedish furniture maker. A warm welcome to you, Niels.
Hey, thank you very much.
And as mentioned, Boris Bertram, the director of The Human Shelter, which I already introduced. He's also the creator of our Housing for All campaign trailer. Welcome, Boris.
Thank you so much. It's a great honor to be here.
And
welcome, guys.
Welcome, thank you. And last but not least on the panel, Christophe Lalande, the UN Habitat Housing Lead Specialist. A very warm welcome, Christophe.
Thank you, Jona. Very.
So let's begin today's conversation about what makes a home. This is a very special year, as we all know. We all are part of a very big life conversation about home. As to say, our homes have been transformed into places where we live, where we are productive and creative, where we go to school, we work, and in big parts we also do our holidays. So, but this year has also shown that home is basically the place where we can stay safe amid the threats of a pandemic. And this year has also shown what it means not to have a home and what a home needs to offer to make life work. And this is precisely what UN Habitat is working for, to ensure that everyone has a place where to live healthy, safely, and in dignity. Boris, you have been going on an expedition on the meaning of home during the past couple of years. And in February this year, your documentary has been screened at the headquarters of the UN during the Commission for Social Development. Could you tell us a bit what your expedition was like and what the Human Shelter is?
Basically, The Human Shelter is an expedition film which is funded by Ikea, who contacted me to create a film that could start a new conversation about home in some of the places around the globe where we are most challenged. And when I mean challenged, I mean places where we are affected by climate change, growing mega cities, places with lack of resources. And also another important issue is there are about 80 million people on the move without a home. Refugees and migration is a very big issue. So we started this expedition raising these questions. When there are 80 million people without a home, what constitutes a refugee shelter? When does a refugee shelter become a home? 25% of the population on Earth are living in an informal settlement or a slum city. So what makes a home in this kind of area, and how can we make better homes in informal settlements? So this was some of the questions we asked before traveling 4 continents and 11 countries, collecting stories, narratives from people living under extreme or really harsh conditions, some of them. I can give an example. We traveled up to Kaitokene to meet with Ellemeyer, who is a reindeer herder, because we also found it relevant to ask a nomadic person, what makes a home? With so many people on the move, we really need to get new knowledge about how we define home for people who have several homes or actually doesn't really have a physical shelter. So the hope with this film was really to actually inspire the conversation we're going to have today in order to find new solutions for how we create better and more safe homes. And I just want to mention also one thing. For me, a physical shelter is really fundamental to creating a home, but we also need to create homes for the heart and the mind. So in this film, we are looking into not only the physical shelter, but also how we feel at home in the body, how beautiful textiles in a refugee camp can make people feel psychological better. So that is my introduction to the film.
Thank you. And it was so great working together in the past month that your findings of the expedition are also really what UN Habitat is working for. And the subline to the campaign was a home is not just a roof, but so much more. And I'd say we all have a look at the beautiful trailer that came out of that collaboration now. So please, colleagues in the background, could you screen the trailer? Thank you. I think those images just capture so beautiful and well how different the meaning of home can be, but also that some aspects of it are really universal, and I guess those aspects are the base of the UN Habitat working mission. Christophe, could you tell us a bit more about the core messages of the campaign and why it is so important to address them and what we can all do to work for it?
No, thank you very much, Jana, and thanks again to Boris and to Ikea for this video, because somehow it really illustrates so well the work that we are doing at UN Habitat and that we have been pushing for now many years. Habitat was founded back in the 70s, and the right to adequate housing is really at the core of the mandate of this UN agency. And for us, it makes it's really like a great pleasure to see in video, to see like the testimony from people around the world on their meaning of housing, of homes, and it's somehow also a very nice way to illustrate what can be like the impact of our working with national government, working with like city mayors to formulate, to design public policies on housing, to promote the right to adequate housing. This is the core of our business. This is what we do. We provide support to decision makers, to policy makers, to frame the right to adequate housing, to try to turn this right into reality. But when you can see actually the impact of what housing means for people, it brings also like this work on housing policy development to life. What strikes me and what we really wanted to achieve through the campaign, it was to also demonstrate the universality of the housing challenges that we've seen. And somehow, of course, I mean, Boris mentioned the huge number of people living in informal settlements, in slums. It's about like 1 billion people globally. Beyond that, you have like 1.8 billion people that are living in inadequate housing conditions. And this is like affecting everyone and everywhere in every cities. And this paradox also is really crude in some part of the world, or some cities that are like global metropolis with a very high level of development, and with this huge gap in between like very rich categories of the population facing like people that don't have access to an adequate place to call home. And what we mean by adequate housing, that somehow is also a very technical term, is very diverse. And we call adequate housing the different components that are like structuring the right to adequate housing. This is helping the United Nations and member states to really like define and to be able to measure progress in the realization of the right. But what matters really is like the fact that people feel comfortable where the place they live, that they feel secure. The security of tenure is really key in that. We have seen that through the pandemic. People being like threatened to be evicted from their house, and all like the incredibly interesting measures that have been put in place at local level, at national level, to prevent people to be like not only forcefully or unlawfully like evicted, but like simply evicted because they are not able to pay their rent or their mortgage anymore. So this is like a critical part of like this component of security of tenure and the fact of being safe at home. But also a component that is very important in our work at UN Habitat is the cultural adequacy of homes that we want to promote as housing models that are really like reflecting the needs of people and their aspiration, their dreams into what they would like to call their house, their home. And this is beautifully translated in this movie. We have seen this diversity of people all around the world, living in different living environments that from our perspective we could find challenging or a bit strange from our own like standing point. But I think that all of us in our different realities, we are facing some specific challenges, and we also have our own definition of a house or of a home. So I'm very thankful to Boris for these beautiful messages, and also I look forward to discuss that further with all the panelists today. Thank you, Rihanna.
Thank you, Christophe. Yeah, it's really all about having a secure place, a place that allows for our aspiration and dreams to flow. And I think that is basically also what all the stories of the human shelter are telling, and that is what Boris has now been presenting in his introduction. Maybe next we can hear a bit more about those personal stories and what those aspirations but also needs are about. We have 3 guests that are also protagonists from the human shelter here with us today. And I would like to firstly invite Ele Maria Eira to tell us a bit more what living with a reindeer herd looks like, and also what or how your Sami culture and your performances in singing is influencing your way of living.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, the Sami people always says that home is in my heart and I carry it with me. But it also means like we are nomadic people and we are following after the reindeers. So it's like my dad said in the movie, my home is where the reindeers are. And we also have 8 different seasons, not only 4. So every season is so important for us. Yeah, and my home is out in the nature where our animals are, and we have a huge respect for the nature and the animals, the reindeer. But also, I'm so thankful to have the silence around me. But lately, I have been feeling like I don't feel so safe anymore at my home because we see and we can feel the climate changes, what's happening right now. And you know, the indigenous people, the other people who stands in the front of the climate changes. So, for example, this year, it's been really unusual, difficult year for the reindeer and the reindeer herders. We had a lot of snow and the weather was really unstable. And that threats our existence in life. In Finnmark, northern Norway, there were tens of thousands of reindeer who were in danger of starving to death on the tundra because of the drastic changes in the winter climate. But also the COVID-19 did make the situation for us really difficult. So yeah, it's been a really, really, really weird winter and summer, and we had a lot of snow in the summer. But right now, we don't have much snow. And, you know, the other day, we can have snow, but the next day maybe it's raining, and then the ground gets so icy, and the reindeers cannot get through the ice and find the food. And that's why they have really, really difficult, you know, they can starve to death then if they don't get down to the ground and find the food. So, yeah.
Thank you for sharing your story. It's like something that we might not have expected, like being in the nature is maybe preventing one from the threats of a pandemic, but then again, it is everywhere, and also the unpredictability of seasons changes the way we're living. And I really think that is something that we need to address in the future also, like how can we stay more flexible when it comes to housing, because we have so many changes, and how can we make sure that we find immediate solutions to really make sure that everyone can live in an adequate way. So thank you for sharing how your year has been like. I would like to invite next Sean Anderson, who has been living in the hotspot of the health crisis in the past half year in New York City. You not only lived in New York, but you also had to move a whole museum, the Museum of Modern Art in New York, to the individual homes. Can you tell us a bit how your year was like?
Well, I first wanted to thank I want to thank the UN Habitat also for inviting me to speak today. It's a great privilege to be speaking with all of you, and I think this past year has been one of great transformation. I think we have been able to see, and when I say we, I think more of citizens rather than a museum professional, but we have been able to see that many of the ways in which our institutions have been constructed and imagined and have proffered in these past decades are also highly subject to climate change, highly subject to a pandemic. And so we've been able to actually experience that the fragility of our society and the fragility of our institutions are fundamentally based on how we as citizens work together. And for the most part, the institution, Museum of Modern Art in New York, shut down temporarily in March, in the middle of March, and we didn't necessarily come back to the institution until August. But in that space of time, what transpired across the United States was also a tremendous call for equity and racial equality. And all of these emerging but long-standing issues and questions about our societies came to the fore in the moment that we all went home for safety reasons, obviously. So it has been one of great transformation on the part of the institution to rethink the ways in which we experience and see art, in as much as we see each other as well. And on the other hand, I would say that the protests and the activism that we have been seeing across America, and now to Christophe's point, the tremendous number of forced evictions and displacements now going to happen because of COVID-19 and its effects has really put to the fore who we are and how we take care of each other. And I feel that what we have been seeing and experiencing these past months is really a moment in which we have to take stock in how we work with each other. So.
Yeah, I think that's the main point. We have to make sure that we can keep creative, that we can keep productive in order to find answers to the challenges, and home certainly, and the conversation on home certainly is the main contributor at this point where we are living at the moment. So thank you for sharing your view from New York. I would like to give the floor now to Andrés Magnussen. In the human shelter, André, you are showing us the glacial landscape in Iceland, and you talk about how rapidly it is changing due to climate change. And what I found so interesting is how you make that connection between the generations in your family. And I would love to hear how we can better connect to the future and what we can do to make sure that we can continue to live safely and healthy in the future.
Yes, thank you, and nice meeting you all through this super technology here, and great seeing you other participants in the film. Yes, so my work that's in my book on time and water and in some other projects, I'm trying to create intimate space out of what is the future that is now maybe dominated by sci-fi or kind of dystopias. That is, when a scientist says 2100, we don't feel connected to that date. We just we just brush it off, and we don't feel the emergency of kind of the processes that we have started that will play out in the year 2100, and we don't feel like the responsibility that we should have, or the urgency. And so I've been kind of playing with this idea of what is our time. That is, what time creates us. And so the time that creates us is the time of the people that we know and love, the people that create our time and kind of creates us, versus the time of the people that we will know and love. So in my case, it would be my grandparents, born around 1920, and some of them around very well into my adulthood. They're in the film, my grandparents. And then if I will know somebody into the future that live as long as they do, then the people I will love the most in my life will still be alive around 2140, easily. And my daughter, because I have my daughter knows my grandmother very well, she will know somebody well into the year 2170, like personally. So my grandmother could whisper a secret to my daughter, and she could whisper this secret to this child, and that child could eventually speak that secret in the year 2170, without that story ever been written down or anything. So I'm trying to create, I call it pancake sci-fi. That is the goal of humans is it's not about gadgets and technology or AI or genetic modification. It's about being human, to continue to be human, raise other humans, be part of communities, and eventually grow old and have pancakes with your grandchildren or neighbors or whatever, and in a kind of a healthy environment, biosphere, and with all the animals that we share this planet with.
Thank you for these words. I think it's so important that we talk about how we continue to be human. And also I like the idea of that we do have a very limited circle of social relations and what we can understand, but it's super important that we use our circle to make sure the continuation of what it is to be human.
And actually there's if we go to the theme of what we're talking about, of housing, then I'm writing in my book On Time and Water about this grandfather of mine that was a glacial explorer. His fate in life was decided when his father drowned when he was 11 years old. And they were so lucky that in the 30s there was a social movement of building homes for the poorest. So actually the poorest family in Iceland got the most modern apartment in Iceland, that is with running water, a running toilet, a shower, an electrical oven. So actually my life has very much to do with an idea of building a house in the 1930s. It is because my grandfather would never have, he would probably had a much more difficult life if he had not been so lucky to be catched when his father died. So it's an important issue.
Yeah, it's maybe also a story of how a crisis can lead to something good in the end, and it's probably something that we really need to consider when we continue in the next couple of months. And Boris, now you've seen 3 of your protagonists of the documentary all engaged in conversation. What do you think?
I mean, it's so interesting. When we started this project back in 2016, and I had this conversation with Nils at Ikea, like, how can we make a film that is curious and playful and that can create a new conversation about home. I had never in my life expected to make friends in around the globe like I have with Andre and Elimaya and Sean. So they've become part of my inner circle, and the inspiration I have had from traveling around the globe, have this being so fortunate to travel 4 continents within 2 years. I come out of this expedition with actually great hope for humanity, because the film is really one long piece of poetry, and I didn't make up the poetry. It came from Andre, it came from Ellemeyer, and it came from Sean when they talked about home. And if I should point out 3 things that the findings of this film, for me, it's really about that poetry is such a big part of constructing a home and talking about home for us as human beings. It is maybe the most fundamental thing as being human is to build a house, 4 walls and a door and some windows, right? But it's also about the colors of textiles in a refugee camp. It's also Ellemeyer's father talking about summer, autumn, winter, and spring as the 4 seasons that create his home. I've been to refugee camps where people without next to nothing really live with dignity and innovation. So there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of human resilience and poetry out there. And that is what really gives me hope. And I also wanted to give UN a look into, human resilience. I know it's a big thing of your understanding of working for humanity, but it's out there, it's alive. And I think for me, this film is a celebration of poetry and creativity for people constructing a home. So that is, and you just heard about it in these 3 from our 3 characters in the film.
Yeah, I was about to say that, and we have like 3 more examples of that, how the personal stories make a home in the end. I would like to ask Niels Larsson. Niels, you have sent Boris on a journey to critical hotspots all over the world. Why is it important for IKEA to engage in this kind of research, and how are the findings of that movie relevant?
Yeah, thanks for asking, and also thanks for inviting. I'm very happy to be here. And I've had the fortune, and been fortunate to follow the whole journey since the original idea until today, and I'm amazed of what happened. We couldn't foresee that. A little bit short about why we do this. IKEA is in the life at home business, and we truly believe, as being producers of home furnishings, we believe that better products contribute to better life at home, and better homes is also contributing to a better world. That's why we are here, because the vision we have is to create a better everyday life at home for the many people. And it is in that direction that we are kind of looking into how people live, trying to understand how people live, and be in connection with that all the time in order to make even better things and solutions for the future. And when we started thinking about how to go about this project and who to work with, etc., we contacted Boris and initiated a discussion around making a movie, because at that point in 2016 we were very curious about how people were living their life in the living room. Because we had at that point also, as part of our kind of research around what's happening in the world, initiated a study called Life at Home survey. And in that survey, we could see that there were some kind of changes going on. People were kind of redefining how they define their home. It was moving beyond the 4 walls very clearly, and we hadn't really seen those kind of movements before. And as a result of that research, and it was also global research, we did it in, I think it was 9 major city areas across the globe. people we could see that there were 4 areas that were contributing to the definition of your home. And it was the space, the 4 walls that you have, etc. And it was also moving towards including the neighborhood. So it was also the place where your home was located. And then, of course, when you consider the place, it's about the relations in that place. The guy in the corner shop, the baker that you might interact with a couple of times of the week, and also, of course, your friends and family that lives close to you. And the 4th dimension was about things. People really talked about all the stuff that they own and the things. But some interesting we could see in that also was that people tended to talk less about the things and the stuff and move toward objects. And to a previous speaker, the hope for the future, I think that movement is really interesting because that kind of indicates that we will see more conscious consumption and taking care of your stuff in a better way moving forward. But it was on that platform we engaged with Boris, and then Boris quite soon said, yeah, but living room is interesting, but I think the home is even more interesting. And luckily enough, we thought so too after that conversation, and we set off. And I think we are, of course, always talking about and chatting about what is home, how can we make things even better, solutions for the future, etc. But we need to get out there and see and meet people in order to understand what they need. And we do that through our business on a daily basis. We do many hundreds of home and maybe even thousands of home visits each year that we go home, knock on the door, and ask people if we can sit down and have a chat about what's their situation. And then, us coming from Sweden in the Nordic part of Europe, very privileged, having a rather good situation when it comes to finance and home and stuff like that. If we are going to contribute for real in the future, we need also to be able to cater to and understand people that maybe is less fortunate and live in conditions that we don't do. So from that perspective, I think it's really important it has been really important to engage in this project to both support the topic as such and create interest for the home, but also to be able to kind of understand and act accordingly, according to the kind of insights that we gather in a project like this.
Thank you. You already touched upon a little where you see the trends and development, and I would like to open that question now to all of the speakers. Where do you see the trends and what will be crucial moving forward, and how can we achieve that the adequateness of housing can be ensured to the majority of people? So please feel free to take the floor on the future vision.
I'll start, perhaps. When Boris approached the museum and myself to document the building of our exhibition, Insecurities, Tracing Displacement and Shelter, that was in 2016. At that time, there were 65 million individuals forcibly displaced in the world, whether due to war, to hunger, to climate, and according to the UNHCR. And now, as Boris has said, we are approaching, if not surpassing, 80 million individuals for the same reasons. From my perspective, I feel that my exhibition project, but also the research that I have been conducting was specifically around displacement and specifically around asylum seekers and refugees in the world. And what I discovered in that research, in that fieldwork, was fundamentally that, again, was the connectedness of humans, of humanity, and the need for thinking productively across boundaries, across borders, across all of the kind of man-made constructions that divide people, and think about ways in which people can come together in a productive and humane way. So shelter is fundamentally that space, whether it's physical or conceptual or intellectual, spiritual. Shelter becomes the means by which individuals and communities and nations can come together in the most impactful way. And if we are not addressing that concept or the design even of the ways in which we are thinking about this, then we are going down a road that I don't think we will be able to return from. And so I'm grateful to hear Boris speak of optimism. And yet I wonder if when we think about the scale of these displacements that will inevitably continue because of climate change in particular, how do we begin to, I don't want to say solve, but how do we resolve the contradictions on one hand of building shelter, of imagining better shelter, at the same time as creating a better space for all of us to live?
Yeah, I guess that is all, like, how can we work across boundaries, but also think about the scale and the dimension of the problem we're facing. Maybe Christophe, you could take the floor and take some of the things that have been said a bit into relation of the UN work.
Yes, no, thank you very much. And I mean, this is like one point, but it's very interesting what Sean is mentioning about displaced persons or people on the move because of climate change, because of conflict, because of natural disasters. And this has been something on which UN Habitat has been working for many years. Too often we see this camp, or what we call transitional shelter, that is not called housing. And we are really interested to work on the sustainability of the so-called shelter. Very often what we have seen is that actually this model are not sustainable from the cultural point of view, that we should not neglect the fact that very often these camps are there to stay and are going to become and turn into like new urbanization. So for us, beyond like all the economic or social components, like the type of building design, the type of engagement also in like with the community that are benefiting from these structures is really like crucial, so that we don't have like one standardized type of prototype housing that is not matching the needs and expectations from people. We have seen that in many, many remote places like across the world, and this is like something very specific in our intervention, but very important as well. Beyond that, if I can come back to your question, Yona, I mean, again, I think that the question of security of tenure is like essential. For too long, we have been like considering that this was perhaps one challenge that was like that people from the global south were facing, or people like in informal settlements were facing exclusively. And we have seen that, I mean, what Sean was mentioning in the States, but I think this is like a reality in many countries from the OECD region. Evictions are on the rise. This pandemic is like showing us that this is going to, there is a high risk, but also that solution exists. So we would like to work also on that, to be able like to really work on these solutions. This also like link me to like the issues of affordability, which is crucial. Also in the work of UN Habitat, to realize the right to adequate housing through addressing the cost of housing, the cost of building housing, but also like the cost for people when it's about like paying their rent or buying the house. I mean, how can we understand that a majority of people now are not able to afford a house that is adequate for their own like aspiration or needs? This is not normal. However, like funding exists, investment exists, and we need to work closer with member states in order to channel this investment and to channel this capital towards the needs of like the most vulnerable, but also like of the vast majority of people overall. The health consideration is also like something that has emerged in the past couple of months. And it's true that this is not something that we had too much in mind when we were like designing public policies on housing with countries. This is like critical. I think it's closely related to how do we address housing needs in the context of the changing climate. Housing also needs to be a place where people can live healthy and that can also protect them from disease, from pandemic, but also like overall like to be able to grow their family without fearing of being impacted by such things. So yeah. I already mentioned the cultural dimension in the case of IDPs. Again, and this is perhaps like more personal point of view, we talk about affordable housing, we talk about security of tenure. I think that the cultural dimension is really essential in the way that people are building houses. Boris mentioned that about humanity, that there is this tendency in humanity of like always building a house. This is perhaps like your most important legacy. You are somewhere, you build a structure to grow your family. And this is like really a reflection of like someone's culture and someone's aspiration. And this is like really important.
Yeah, thank you so much for bringing up the cultural dimension. Boris has actually shared another clip, or like he's going to share with us another clip from the Human Shelter that is also like bringing in the cultural dimension of the importance of home. And we have a couple of minutes left. So before we show that other clip, I would like to ask if there are any questions from the audience, or if there are further comments from the speakers.
I just, can I say something? Do you hear me? Yeah. I just want to say that I think it's important to remember that our home is the Mother Earth. The nature doesn't need us, but we as people need the nature. So it's important to take care of the nature and the planet. And it's about, do we as human want to exist and survive? Thank you.
Yeah, that is the fundamental and only question that we need to like make the base for all our other activities. Thank you, Ella Maria. Thank you so much. Other comments or questions?
Maybe add to Ella Maria that we have to start understanding that when we build ourselves shelters and homes and cities, that we may not be destroying the real home at the same time. And I think that is the biggest understanding of our times, is that homes, energy consumption, city planning, these are the huge challenges of the 21st century. Concrete being 6% of the CO2, so it's almost everywhere you look at the concept of home and how we have to rethink, redesign, and reevaluate so many things. And one artist told me that apocalypse does not mean the end of the world. It means a revelation. It means to reveal something. And the coronavirus has been revealing so much in the last year that we will have very interesting times when we're kind of still complementing on what we learned and understood. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, as I said, we're going to watch another clip from Boris, but before that, I would like to maybe wrap up the panel discussion we're having, and maybe we can do that. Like, I would like to ask every speaker to like use the sentence "home is" and fill it with one word or one sentence. What is really the crucial meaning of home in your way? So just feel free to go one after the other. Home is. Do you need more time to think about it? It's not so easy, the answer, right? We just talked about the complexity of home, but like wrapping up, what is home? Like one final sentence. Sean?
I was just thinking, Yuna. I'm going to say home is both universal and individual and never static.
That is beautiful. You didn't even need to think further. Very nice. Thank you so much.
I can continue. I think home is the most important place in the world.
Yeah, that is quite a sentence. Thank you, Neil.
Home is where your heart is. First that came in mind. It's not my words.
Say it again.
Home is where your heart is. I found it on the internet. First Google.
Boris.
Yes, home for me is poetry and physical security.
Thank you. Ele Maria?
It's like I said earlier, that home is in my heart and I carry it with me.
Thank you.
And I would say that home is about yourself and your identity.
Oh, that is very nice. Home is about your identity. Thank you so much, Christoph. I think those are really the great key lines that we could need to. Okay, I think I'm the others can unmute. Thank you. Yeah, like closing up our conversation about what makes a home, and also like reflecting on the Housing for All campaign. Just another invitation to watch the documentary of Boris, The Human Shelter. It is available on the UN Habitat YouTube channel, and it is available with subtitles in all UN languages. So for those who haven't seen it yet, go on the UN Habitat YouTube and watch it. And as a gift from Boris, it will be online until New Year. So it's perfect for the holiday season that most of us again will be spending at home. So share it with your family and friends. And this is also an invitation to make sure to be part of the conversation on home. If something has been shown now in our conversation, that it is something that is universal, but it's also something that is very specific to the individuals. So be part of it and make sure that we can all create the conversation about home in a way that we can really move forward and achieve a betterment of the conditions. So thank you, everyone. Maybe it is possible to send the link to the documentary in the chat box here for everyone to follow up. And I would like to thank everyone. I would like to thank UN Habitat. I would like to thank Ikea. I would like to thank Boris and also the Good Company Pictures and your team who helped setting up that teaser. And I wish everyone a festive holiday season at home. Stay safe and make sure to keep up the conversation on home. Thank you very much.